very good day to all of you listeners out there. Welcome to another episode of Simon Says. Today we have Lanshi as a guest.
Hello, hello.
And of course, Lyra.
Hello.
So we haven't had Lanshi for a while already, but today I think, Lyra and I were just discussing the things we want to talk about, right? And we thought, hey, maybe she'll be a good kind of person to come in to discuss because it's really more like a feel and, just comment on what's been happening. And last week we talked about Jocelyn Chia, right?
Yes.
And the whole cancel culture. But I think today's topic is somewhat related. So what are we talking about today, Lyra?
We're talking about Bak Kut Teh.
Bak Kut Teh, yes. I mean, we're not having Bak Kut Teh here. We're drinking Coke and Vida. But it's on a news article, 13th of June. And I think maybe we just show the article first and then go through a little bit. Then we have a free flow kind of discussion, okay? So it's a Malaysiakini report. The title is called Celebrate Diversity. Now, we don't really like the work, but here I think it is appropriately used. Tourism Minister backs Bak Kut Teh as heritage dish. Now, of course, who is the Tourism Minister? I mean, Datuk Seri Tiong King Sing, right? And Lanshi, we asked you to come here because the other day we were talking about this. and you were saying, oh, this guy is really the mad man of Sarawak. When we say mad, we don't mean insane, right?
Yeah. I mean, mad as if like someone who can be perceived by even the majority as crazy, but is someone who is also speaking the truth and sensible. And it's basically just, in today's context, it's really like a wrecking ball against the
like
political correctness like that. Yeah.
Now, interestingly, Tiong King Sing, I don't know how many of you have seen him in Parliament. I'm not sure if he even uses Bahasa, but very often he doesn't even want to use Bahasa. And I guess MP from Sabah, Sarawak, they are sort of exempted. But he didn't even, sometimes he'll be like, oh, yang di Pertua speaker, izinkan saya to use English or whatever. I think he doesn't even do that. It's just like, I'm a member of Parliament, are you stopping me from speaking? And you see some of his live discussion. I mean, some people call him vulgar. Some people call him out of line. But in this article, if we come back, he really speaks a lot of truth, right?
Yep.
So Lyra, maybe you just give us a bit of background, why the whole Bak Kut Teh discussion come into the consciousness of Malaysia. I mean, right after Jocelyn Chia, and later we're going to talk about the link actually.
Yeah, so we have this MP, Jimmy Poa. So earlier on, he was just watching some documentary. And in fact, he saw that Singapore was claiming Bak Kut Teh to be the heritage dish. And in his words, he was very much angry because how come everyone knows that it's originated from Klang? Yes, but what's the big deal about this whole thing? But the thing is, what makes our tourism minister came out to say is because his deputy is also supporting the argument by the MP of Langkawi. Basically, they are saying that no, it should be something that is to be enjoyed by all Malaysians. So that's pretty much the whole context. So which is why we come to this article here that says that the Minister of Tourism is pretty much backing this whole dish as the national heritage.
So let's go back to that one point first. A national heritage dish should be enjoyed by everyone. So that's like, we have a term, we call it the lowest common denominator. So if you want something to be accepted by everyone, the lowest level has to accept. But is that the way to value culture and heritage?
No.
I mean, it's like, okay, Mona Lisa is European, so it doesn't pass our Asian sensibility, so it shouldn't be considered art. I mean, I know this is a bit ridiculous kind of example, but that's essentially what the Deputy Tourism Minister is trying to say. And interestingly, I mean, we say coming back to the link with Jocelyn Chia because of the whole competition, the dissing. And Lanshi, you were saying earlier on about if we don't claim certain things as ours, Singapore is going to steal it.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the whole Bak Kut Teh saga, it is actually, this is what Jocelyn Chia was talking about, that we are we are captured so much by the race, the religion, but we can't see the bigger picture. And worse, I mean, as a country, as a nation, we are losing our competitiveness, compared to our neighboring country like Singapore especially.
And we're just saying that, look, why so many people, I mean, we're just looking at even up to today, the reactions, all the negative reaction is like feeling very sore and things like that. These are not hurting Jocelyn Chia at all. In fact, she became even more famous. But we were just saying that, is it because there is some truth in what she says and
that's right.
people felt hurt by that?
Yeah.
And she was saying Malaysia was backward, we are not progressive. And I guess there is quite a bit of truth in there. And Lara, you're just saying, right, with the exchange rate between ringgit and Singapore dollar is at all-time high.
Yeah.
And that subtle, maybe kind of compressed inferiority complex are coming out. But anyway, when it comes to food, we are not inferior to Singapore at all.
No, not at all.
So, I mean, you ask any Malaysian, that's why we had no problem dissing Singapore for their inferior food. I mean, in fact, many Singaporeans will agree. I mean, why do they flock to Ipoh and Singapore and Penang? And nowadays, they even go to Kuching for Sarawak laksa and things like that. So it's like, why? Did you see a lot of Malaysians go to Singapore for food?
No.
And with the type of exchange rate for half the price, you can enjoy much better food for the Singaporean.
Yes, interesting. And that's why, we go to Singapore, for sightseeing, maybe some high-tech shopping, maybe some high-brand shopping, but not really for food. But to be fair, their hawker food is cheap.
Yeah.
And you can have affordable food. But is it quality heritage food?
Questionable.
Yeah, but we're not really talking about that today, because let's come back to what Dato' Sri Tiong King Sing said. And when I first was planning to talk about this topic, I was thinking more in terms of, here in this show, we have been kind of pivoting on state elections. And the whole state election, the mood is really like, how do we... you have those who support the unity government, and they're like, look, we need to have moderation, we need to fix our economy. But at the same time, you get this kind of the rubbish issue. When I say rubbish, I'm talking about you are basically causing a sidetrack. And it's like people are, why are we arguing over Bak Kut Teh when we should be talking about economy and things like that? But it kind of make me think that this whole, I call it culture war. It is culture war because religion is not supposed to dominate our life and society like this, but somehow in Malaysia, we have allowed it to happen. And I think only someone who is totally not truthful would say religion doesn't impact our society as it should not be. But anyway, we come back to this whole issue about religion, and later I want to just get both your take, because this is not something that can be easily resolved. And we also see that with the unity government, they're a bit hesitant, they are like kind of like, we better don't do the thing that spook certain culture and religion. But it's like, but I can understand the tension, because the unity government, basically you have two very different group of ideology coming in together. But still, let's I want to read some of the things that Dato' Sri Tiong said. And he said, look, when it comes to food, quote, I think we must open up. We must be open-minded, not think so much about it as halal or non-halal. Can it be touched or not? And I find it very interesting, because it's almost like, Lan Shi was saying, the madman, the wrecking ball, and I don't know if he intends it. He is basically wrecking his own deputy. He was wrecking the MP from Langkawi. He was wrecking all those people to say you can't sell pork in this place because we have other people who doesn't consume pork. Then why don't you do the same with beef? But what do you think of all these things? I mean, it's like, but what? Okay, let me give you my take first. Then I want to hear from both of you, because the thing that really struck me was nobody really dared to stand up against him.
That's
Point
right.
number one. And we've been talking about the decentralization and how Sabah and Sarawak really have more bargaining power now. And this is the kind of decentralization I like to see, because when you have more power, you can say something that makes sense, and maybe people are afraid to agree, but I think deep down, a lot of non-Muslim will agree. Why should this be an issue? Why should what I ate be affected by what you believe? I mean, it's between you and your God, right?
Yeah.
But what do you both think about this statement?
Now, the thing is that this Bak Kut Teh issue, I was also thinking, why only Dato Sri Tiong spoke out? You know, I mean, it's something that
he's tourism minister. Okay,
okay.
That's
He's
his job.
tourism. correct. But it is like the same can be applied to, for example, beef rendang.
Mm-hmm.
So can I say beef rendang is offensive? Because not all Malaysian, you have Malaysian who find eating beef offensive, you know, and many Malaysians can't accept that. The Buddhists, the Hindus. So
maybe offensive. Now, when you say offensive, now very interesting. Recently, I mean, a few weeks ago, I went to Johor for a business trip, and I went to Muar actually. So Muar is famous for one of the beef noodle shop, you know. So we went there, and so the one who is like treating us, they just everyone can eat beef, but if someone cannot eat beef, no big deal, you know. Then I just eat something else. I think maybe they are not really offended. I don't think so. You know, it's more like my belief doesn't allow me to eat. My religious boundary doesn't allow me to eat. But then I'm not offended that someone sat opposite me have beef. You know, I know many of my friends, maybe Buddhist or Hindu, who doesn't consume beef. They are not offended by that.
Yeah, that's right.
Most of the time. So I guess then the issue is why the offense.
That is very interesting.
I mean, do you know any non-beef eater who will be very offended if you eat beef? And they can't. Maybe some cannot stand the smell and things like that. Lamb, I know lamb. Some people are like that.
Well, I would think like in a workplace, especially, you know, you have mixed races, and if you have colleagues who are who obviously can't eat non-halal food.
Yep.
And it is almost like a silent agreement that non-halal food is not allowed in a public
pantry,
sharing,
in a
in
kitchen,
a pantry,
microwave.
in a microwave. You know, especially if you work in the public sector. Not sure private sector. I guess the policy can differ from company to companies, and depends how big is your company, who works there, and things like that. So I would say more so. More problematic with non-halal food. And
So why is it so? Is it because there is that silent agreement? Is it because it's a majority race here? I mean, we are going into a territory which a lot of people are not comfortable to discuss.
Correct. It's because it is not so much the food issue. I think it is more of the race, the religion issue, still back to that you know, that rabbit hole that has been holding the whole country for generations, and seems like, you know, this is one of the things that we are struggling to navigate. Yeah, and it's not just it's not just affecting the race and the religion locally, but if you step back in a wider perspective, it's affecting the whole country, the whole standing of a country in Southeast Asia, even in the world. I mean, just talking about food industry and food as a tourist attraction alone. You know, Korean food, so popularized by obviously Korean drama, but how many tourists travel to Korea just to eat the different type of Korean food? And if you want to just make Bak Kut Teh as this type of race and religion issue, but you lose the perspective that this Bak Kut Teh can attract tourists and promote Malaysia tourism, then, you know, and you let Singapore taking and claiming that as their heritage food, then, you know, how is the country going to advance with this type of mentality? And with the same MPs that is saying this is not representing Malaysian, what sort of food will all Malaysian be agreed upon? and represent all Malaysia? You tell me, right?
Yeah, exactly. I felt like this whole thing is actually linked to. You talk about the silent agreement earlier on, but I felt like it's actually a form of cult of actually fake tolerance, because I felt like people are so ingrained by the whole idea of no, we just want harmony. At no cost shall we rock this whole boat, be it factual or not factual, because I felt like this whole thing is manufactured.
Yeah.
So there is that. We somehow just got sucked into all this sort of cult of basically just having to tolerate each other and in the name of harmony. But the thing is, Malaysia is so unique on its own because of the diversity that we have in the culture. I mean, not many other countries have this sort of legacy. So a lot of people will actually want to hire Malaysians for work, for instances, because of our diversity.
Yep.
Because of the fact that you are able to converse
True diversity.
various languages. So because of that, that is actually added value. So why do we need to, like what you say, throw away the cost benefit just because of, well, my religion say I can't eat this. But actually, whose religion? I mean, there's only just one religion that really can't eat this, but it doesn't mean that every other religion should or other races should tolerate like nasi lemak. I mean, why should we claim nasi lemak to be the heritage dish, for instance?
Yeah, and very interesting you talk about this forced tolerance, because we have seen the progressions. Because, I mean, in the 80s, in the 70s, we don't have this so-called policing of food. And then now you have the policing of food. And now I give you another example, which is not secret at all. If you are a hotel, you are F&B, you wanted to take government business, you have to be 100% halal. So if you even have a non-halal entity, you will not get the job. So you see, this is the kind of things which come from what Lara you were saying, the forced harmony. And I'll go one step further and say this is weaponized control. And we know this issue, and why people are silent, I guess there's the fear of authority and then the fake harmony that you talk about. But what is the root issue here? Is it because we kind of bring religions into every aspect of our sphere?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, I think because we were brought out learning the history. Basically, May 13 is one of huge issue in Malaysia. And so I guess somehow consciously or subconsciously, we will just be having that at the back of our mind. So don't go there, because that's where non-tolerance will lead you.
But when it comes to food, I mean, do you think it's kind of ridiculous? I mean, I'm just going to read another quote by Dato Sri Tion, and he said, look, if they politicize this food issue, I wonder who he referred to, it will soon turn into incitement resulting in racial religious divisions. This action could affect ethnic and religious unity in the country. I mean, he is using it from another point of view. It's like, if you make this an issue, you are the one who are inciting racial disharmony.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's why this is the wrecking ball kind of temperament that he has. And I think people don't even realize that he's whacking back the religious institution. He's wrecking his own deputy for saying all kind of nonsense. But that's the thing. It's like, now I know we sort of diagnose the issue. Everyone knows this, we don't need to teach Malaysian about this. But what do you think can be done? I mean, we know that this is holding us back because, look, Malaysian strength is always a multicultural, but when you kind of insert this kind of forced harmony, all of a sudden, you don't have true harmony already. You have false and forced harmony because it's not real.
Yep.
I mean, we just look at other nations with multicultural. I mean, of course, these days we have a lot, but classic example of a nation with many different origin. You look at America, for example, they're called Rainbow Nation. Australia, very similar to us. The land law and company law, very similar. The people there, they have no issue calling themselves American. They have no issue calling themselves Australian. And yet, they are not compromising their own heritage, right? I mean, Australia, you have the Vietnamese, you have the Lebanese, you have the Greek. They have the largest Greek diaspora outside Greece. And I mean, they do their own Greek thing.
Yep.
A big fat Greek wedding. I don't know how many of you watch that. That kind of, they are very, very much culture, but they are not. They won't be like, okay, if you don't like Slovakia or you don't like Greek salad or you don't like whatever, we're going to say you're a bad guy. I mean, now I think about it, it's almost childish, right? you want to disagree over food. And I think that's the thing I get from the tourism minister. He is like trying to, I don't know, shame them. And it's like, if you fight over food, you are worse than a child. I mean, I get that feeling from him. I was trying to find a video. I couldn't find a video. I can just imagine his expression.
Yeah.
He'll be like, "Kamu semua orang." I don't know. You know, he's like that kind of guy.
Yeah, I would say like, look, I mean, if you are a vegetarian and if you're a Hindu, you do not have to be told by the government to say that you know beef is something that is not allowed in your culture. I mean, as a Chinese, we brought up with a Chinese culture. If you grow up in a Malay Muslim family, you understand your religion, you understand your Malay culture. And same for Indians, same for Iban, same for many other races. And, you know, I mean, it's like this statement and this whole saga, to me, it reflects the narrow perspective of the politician themselves rather than reflection of the whole community.
So do you agree that the issue is weaponized?
Yes.
So I mean, of course, historically, because they use the education system, for example.
Yeah. I think it is not so much whether Bak Kut Teh is a heritage food, but it's more like, you know, maybe this is about the identity of a race that they felt like they still need to protect. But this is really from the problem from within rather than from external, you know, and yeah.
But what would you say to them? I mean, it's like, for example, you can't eat this food. You can't go into you can't go into a religious body that is not of your religion. You know, there's a hoo-ha over that. You can't, what else? You can't read a spiritual book of another religion. Remember a while ago, there was this independent movie called Mentega Teban. And I don't think it was banned because it was on a streaming channel. But the director was called by the police to give a statement. I don't know what's happening. But in the movie, I don't know how many of you are aware, there was this girl, and she was just kind of like contemplating what does it feel like to understand. You know, I think the movie is trying to say, look, try to understand other culture and religion. But even then, it's like cannot. And when you think like that, you cannot do this, you cannot go to the place, you cannot eat this food. Doesn't it make what you believe so, I don't know what's the word, it's like so, it's like, is your foundation so weak? Flimsy.
Are you so unsure about your identity, about your religion, that you need the law or you need the whole country to agree on one thing like that? But also, I would say maybe for the younger generation who are more exposed, because now you have internet and things like that, a bit more free maybe. I can't help but to link this with Singaporean again. You know, like how Singaporean, they are not allowed to eat chewing gum, and you know, they are not allowed to
follow
drive.
the law.
Follow the law, basically. But when the law allows, when they come to the other side, you know, to Malaysia, they become unhinged, and they just do whatever that they were not allowed to do in their place. And then you have another sort of scenario where you have something called Streisand effect, where the more you try to ban something, you know, it's like Joycelyn Chan like that. Suddenly she becomes so famous because she got cancer left, right, center. Everyone is talking about her.
Actually, she wasn't cancelled, you know. It's more like the Malaysian thing she's being cancelled. But I think she gained popularity.
Exactly. It's that type of totally opposite effect that the more you ban it, the more I want to find out what is in it, you know. Yeah.
And I think that's with children, right? And even teenagers, we talk about it previously. Like, for example, if, you know, like teenager before they go to college or university, sometimes they go overseas. and they maybe in an environment that is very, very strict, come back, can only do certain things, no freedoms, and not given the opportunity to exercise independence. And all of a sudden, they are put in Australia, they are put in Sydney, Melbourne, or even London, wherever, and they just become a crazy person. A crazy as in totally loose, because they don't understand the boundary. They have not developed that conviction, I'll say.
Yeah.
So, and that's why you see a lot of the Muslim who are trying to fight this issue. You think about Miriam Mokhtar, you think about Siti Kasim and those people. I mean, they are really in a minority. But sometimes I do feel like maybe even among the younger generation, many people agree with them, but it's just the whole atmosphere, the whole upbringing, the whole establishments hanging over, and people will be like, it's just easier to follow the flow and drift rather than be my own person.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what a lot of people are doing, just follow the crowd.
Yeah.
And also I would say like the molding of a person, of the religion, of the belief, of the culture, so much of it comes from the family.
Mm-hmm.
It's not from what the government tells you,
Yeah.
what Sharia court tells you, but it's really what your parents taught you, what your Quran tells you, what does your Bible tells you,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, basically, I felt like the government is trying to take on the role of parenting. I mean, like it or not, it's almost like they wanted to control us since the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if I can create this whole population, this whole generation, even to just be super conforming to my laws and even thoughts, and I would have free army at my expense. So I really felt like it's more politicized than we like to think.
And that's what we say, right? I mean, since May 13, we created an entire generation. They have this siege mentality, and that's why certain politicians will always say, look, these people are undermining the Malay rights and things like that. But when you kind of study the whole institutions, everything is under their control. From the GLC, from politics, from public service, everything. I mean, to be fair, they are by far the largest majority race. So it's not surprising they will be the one driving the agenda. So there is nothing to be afraid of. And that's why I agree with you that all these issues are there to create what we call siege mentality. And of course, food is actually the least of the issue, but then it kind of, the religion, the faith, and after a while, they need all kind of draconian law to silence the people. I mean, up to even not the last G, maybe the last G, people are still talking about maybe May 13 will repeat. I don't think you hear that anymore because that ghost had been laid to rest. But I want to finish today because our time is sort of running out. Now, we talk a lot about the diagnosis, and I think we know the diagnosis. But what are some of the things that you believe can be done to mitigate that? Of course, when you have power and influence, you can be a madman like Dr. Sri Tiong King Sing, because he has the courage and he knows, it's almost like he has the aura of a gangster. I mean, that's his reputation, And, in Sarawak, we have a few politicians, right? We have him, we have Walbo. Okay, if you don't know who is Walbo, then you should go and talk to Sarawak. Okay, this is how we have to find out the real name of Walbo. But anyway, that's besides the point today. But in your mind, what can be done? What can we do? I mean, is this a winnable fight, or let's not be bothered? What do you all think? I mean, let's just finish off with these concluding thoughts. Maybe Lyra, start with you first.
Well, I think because at the very beginning, we actually framed this whole thing as a cultural war.
Mm-hmm.
So I really felt like parents should really take on the responsibility of really educating their children. I mean, like it or not, there is a form of heritage to be passed on. The culture, the really just the vast diversity that we enjoy. So that sort of thing, I felt like the good values can be passed on, and you can actually because I felt like a lot of older generations, they actually say before this whole thing became too politicized,
Yep.
they were actually living in harmony. They don't know races as how we know it today.
Yep.
They don't see each other based on the color, skin color. So that sort of things, I think parents should really, really drill it down to the kids at the very beginning, before they even go to the schooling system and became
Yep.
like basically brainwashed. So I felt like there is still a lot to be done here. The thing is, parents need to be aware that a lot of times they just, for convenience, maybe they just relinquish the whole educating to basically our governmental education system.
Yeah, I think is what we are seeing, for example, in the West. I mean, the West, of course, have different issue. They have more of the LGBT, the woke issue, and where the education system is basically pushing it out to people. And I totally agree with you that if there is that education and nurturing at home, then the children can become more open-minded. I mean, I always find that the children who are more open-minded, it is because the parents have nurtured them in such a way, experience different things. I mean, there are different ways to do it. I mean, every kid have different personalities. Some they need to experience it. Some they need to see the modeling from the parents. And sometimes there's a lot of talking and discussing. But if parents don't do anything, then they will just follow the drift of the whole. Now, I'm just thinking about, now before Lanshi come with the concluding thoughts, I was just thinking about the whole cultural war you mentioned, because food, I mean, is really the least of it. But it's like, okay, if you think there is so much differences with different religions, then what about things like blood transfusion? You know, we talk about it, right? Then you want halal money? You know, it's like it's getting more and more ridiculous, you know, because like Lanshi was just saying, you know, there is that unspoken rule, let's not share the common area. But like it or not, there's a lot of interaction. Why are we creating barrier like this?
Yeah.
And it's only going to get worse if people. But I really believe if the parents kind of say, look, you know, we don't eat beef, but you can sit down and eat other food with other people. You know, if you educate your children like that, then they won't take it as an offense. But if you say, oh, beef is evil, the smell of beef is evil. I know people who cannot stand the smell of beef. Now, maybe it's really they don't like it, but I believe a lot is due to their conditioning since young. But anyway, Lanshi, what do you think of the whole thing? And some of the things that we can do, some of the things that we can maybe talk about. You know, even, I was thinking, I mean, even the things we talk about, I don't think it's very comfortable for a lot of people to talk about it. I mean, I'm a bit surprised the direction we go.
It's only food.
It's only food. Okay, we're going to eat beef and pork later. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if given chance, I would want that button, you know. Just press that button and go back to before May 13 and
Oh, we don't have that button, right?
No, we don't. And reset the whole country in a totally different direction. But like Ra said, May 13 was really a very it just totally changed the direction of a country after that. But I think going forward, I'm hoping to see more politicians will be like, Dato' Sri Tiong.
The madman from Bintulu.
Yeah,
Yes.
the madman from Bintulu. But I guess like what Simon said, you know, because of where he comes from, probably there's more freedom for him to be, and also the fact that he is also a tourism minister, that he has that authority to speak up like that. But I think the country will need to talk about the difficult issue that revolve around race and religion without that type of intimidation from the politician, from the law, and the way I look at how some of the Perikatan Nasional politicians talk about issues like nurses' clothing being too tight today, or even the food-related issue, it seems like the bigger picture is they want to implement Sharia law in a wider scale. And this does not represent Malaysian. You know, while Malay is majority, but this is not Malaysian. And I would say, by their standard, if they think Bak Kut Teh is not heritage food because it does not represent Malaysian, you are not you will not be elected into the federal office because you do not represent all Malaysians. Yeah.
And I think now I think it's a good time to think about in 1963, when all the nations come together, they wanted a Malaysia for Malaysian. I think that is very much true. I mean, you think about from SGPP, Ong King Hui, you talk about Lee Kuan Yew, even Kowloon Lingkang Party, they were talking about that. And it was never about, the dominance of a particular race and religion. That's not how multicultural should be working. And I think this is really the war that this generation is going to face, and especially with the unity government, with Perikatan Nasional. I mean, of course, we already have Perikatan earlier on, other iterations. Basically, a Malay Muslim dominated collision. I mean, with the few tokens, Chinese, Indian, and Native. I mean, that's not Malaysian. That's not a Malaysian party for Malaysia, right? And so, yeah, I guess the people have to decide, because people are now complaining about unity government, you're not doing enough. But the fact is the voters did not give them enough mandate to go into the Malaysia for Malaysian kind of. And so I guess the state election is going to be very, very interesting, because depending on how it goes, we can go closer to a Malaysia for Malaysian, or we can move further away.
Yep.
Yeah. So before we end, I have this final thought that was in my mind, and I also like, if you want that type of totalitarian control, and you can have a government who say they can hold that type of responsibility, that type of power, but you can also have someone who is like Mao, who is entrusted with that type of power, and then you have cultural revolution that totally destroy a generation of people, or Pol Pot.
Yep.
And cultural issues should not be politicized like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's really Marxism, that's really the root of everything, destroy everything, destroy your history, change your history. I mean, that's critical race theory.
Yeah.
And that is being weaponized right now in America. And that's why we are always talking about America, because they represent a very unique self-determination model, which, we have many East Malaysian listeners. They're always very interested in that portion of the discussion, especially when it comes to MA63. But at the same time, you can see the opponent of self-determination wants to kill it. And what's the best way to do it? Let's change history. Let's rouse the emotion of culture. I mean, and it's like, I guess we all have our cultural, it's not deficiency. We have our cultural, what's the word already? I use inferiority complex. That certain things, that's why once in a while I hear people say, we should be like China, we should use communism. It's like, what load of rubbish is that? You have not experienced communism before. This generation of Chinese do not experience that. They are in free market and kind of thing. But it's like people say things which they don't understand, because it come out from maybe the cultural inferiority complex, and when they see certain things are happening, that they want it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a huge challenge, because culture and religion always the monkey on the back, right? So I think the next time we come back, I think it will be state election cycle already.
Yes.
And I think this is going to be one of the major point in the state election, it's like, because it's really two very different ideology, right? So I guess those of you who are listening and watching, you can write to us, give some comments. What would you like us to discuss? You want this kind of chili party kind of discussion, or you want something more political, more policy driven? But those are like heavy research, boring discussion. But anyway, I think that's all the time we have for today. So until next time. So Lanshi and Lyra, thanks for joining us today.
Bye-bye.
We shall see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Bye bye.